Okay, we might get started because we don't have that long today and we've got lots of amazing things to share with you. So, firstly, welcome to everyone that's joining today. I think we've got colleagues within 54 Reasons. I think we've got some of our partner organisations and people from the sector and government as well. So, welcome everyone and thanks for joining us today. My name's Vicky Moore. I'm the Executive Director of 54 Reasons, and I'm really happy you're all joining us today for a conversation about youth justice, which obviously we all know has been a lot in the media at the moment and is a hot topic of discussion, but very specifically about rights respecting youth justice and what young people in particular have told us at 54 Reasons. Just before we get started, we'll be recording today's session and we will also be using the Q&A function, which hopefully in these years after COVID, everyone's familiar on how to use it. But please do feel free to ask questions through the Q&A function on Teams, but also feel welcome to share any of your reflections directly in the chat. So we're keen to hear from you, as well as share with you some of the things that young people have told us through this report. Feel also free to pop in the chat where you're from so that we know who's joining us today. Before we get started properly, I just wanted to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're all meeting across the country. I have the absolute joy of joining from Wurundjeri and Bunurong country here in Melbourne, and I want to acknowledge the traditional custodians on whose lands we live and work and honour their continued connection to land, sea, skies and water. Paying my respects to elders past and present, I also wanted to pay my respects to the young people that we're currently working with across the country, and also the First Nations practitioners that work alongside children and young people every day, many of whom were involved in the consultation that we're here to talk about, and acknowledging the impact of the current youth justice system on young First Nations people across this big country. Also, of course, acknowledging the lands on which you're all on today as well. Before we go any further, we thought it would be best to hear some words from a young man who's actually been part of one of our 54 Reasons programs, because it's so important to hear the voices of young people with direct experience, and they have a right to be heard. On the screen, you can see here are some words he's shared to introduce himself, and you're about to hear and listen in to some of his other reflections. Of course, this is being shared with his consent, so we'll just listen and hopefully we'll cross our fingers that the audio works.
When I was around 13 or 14 years old, a decision was made for me to go into care of child safety. I was let down by the state care system. I think that's where it really started for me. That's the point where my reoffending got worse because there was nobody there to support me or offer me a different path. The first time I went to Cleveland Detention Center, I was 16 years old. The second time I went, I was in there for 8 or 9 months. That time I went in, it was hard. I spent a lot of time locked up in a cell. I didn't get to go to programs or connect with family and services. Being in the system and feeling like no one really gave a shit about me, it meant it was hard to open up to people and trust them. I feel a lot of the boys and young people are repeat offenders because they don't know how to live a life outside of detention. That's where the system's at fault. It's a scary step going from being in a lockup for so long to transferring into a society that has expectations of you. Tough on crime isn't doing anything. Putting kids in Cleveland with no support, that's not doing anything. What needs to happen is for people to actually listen and work with the community, to give these kids a purpose and to show them that there's a better path out there for them, like they did with me.
So we're all here today because we know that the current youth justice system isn't working. And there's something that young person just said that we all heard that I really want to call out and that sits with me every day when I'm thinking about our programming. And that is what needs to happen is for people to actually listen. We can have all kinds of political debates around youth justice and safety, and we can continue to discuss the impact of historical and ongoing disadvantage. But we also need to make sure that we stop and that we listen to children and young people themselves. And in many ways, that's the theme of today's webinar. So what can and must we learn from children and young people themselves about youth justice? Children and young people have a right to be heard and to be taken seriously. And that's just as important in youth justice as in every other context in which 54 Reasons and all of us on this call today work. So for those of you who don't know, 54 Reasons is Save the Children's Australian identity, and our name refers to the 54 articles in the Convention of the Rights of the Child. We provide rights respecting services, including in youth justice, across the country, so in every state and in the NT. And we also advocate for policy reform and system change to uphold children's rights. And that's what we'll be talking about today. And as a child rights organisation, our strategy includes a particular focus on advocating for rights respecting youth justice systems, and in particular, relevant today, is elevating those young people's voices. So today we're really excited to launch a new report that shares what people have told us across our services and what matters to them. And you'll see the themes in particular are around connection and belonging. We'll be hearing from a few different areas of our organisation today, and that's really deliberate because a rights-based approach requires us to work across all parts of the organisation, joining up our policy, our practice and our services to change the systems that are impacting the children and young people that we work with every day. We'll talk about why a rights-respecting approach is important in youth justice, how we created the report, what young people shared, and then what it means to all of us. And our speakers will introduce you as they come on in. And first, I'll hand over to Howard Chu, our Head of Policy and Advocacy at 54 Reasons. Many of you will know him. I don't think I need to introduce him too much. And he's also the Director of the Australian Centre of Child Rights. Howard, over to you.
Thanks, Vicky, and hi, everyone. As Vicky just said, I've got the real privilege of leading 54 Reasons policy and advocacy agenda. Like Vicky, I'm on Wurundjeri country. I would also like to pay my respects to elders past and present, and also to acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are watching this webinar today. I'm just going to take a few minutes to briefly set the scene, and I'm going to talk about why a rights-respecting approach is particularly important in youth justice. So you're here at this webinar today, the chances are you know that the landscape for youth justice across Australia is really ugly and it's getting worse. And when you look across the country right now and look at what's been done state by state for the last couple of years, I think it's fair to say that there's serious backsliding away from evidence-based policy and backsliding away from respecting children's rights. In multiple states and territories in the last 2 to 3 years, we've seen the enactment of really punitive bail and sentencing laws and seeing the effects of that with more children in prison. We're seeing diversionary options are being reduced. The conditions in youth detention just continue to be absolutely unacceptable. And of course, sadly, all of this applies to children as young as 10, nearly everywhere across the country. So we've got youth justice systems that are actively harming children and young people and infringing their rights. And more than that, and related to that, these systems are not working. They're not achieving their goals. Because we know that when children are criminalised and imprisoned, that makes them more likely to have further contact with the justice system. There's really clear evidence about that, and they're more likely to reoffend. So these punitive approaches that run through our justice systems are actually entrenching trajectories into the criminal justice system further, which ultimately makes the community less safe. So what does all that mean? The clearest thing it means is that we need a different approach in youth justice. We need an approach that's based on respecting children and young people's rights, rather than the current, which is often based in breaching those rights and punishment. So one thing I'd really like to emphasise is that when we talk about, when we focus on respecting rights, it brings a really fundamental change in our orientation. So it's a really different worldview. A rights respecting approach actually shifts everything about how we understand what we're doing and what we're talking about by putting children's human dignity at the centre of all decisions. So it's about centering children and young people's individual experiences, their rights, and their developmental circumstances and needs. Integral to that, of course, is taking children and young people seriously and taking their views, so their voices, experiences, and perspectives seriously. And in saying that, what I'm talking about is children's right to participate in decisions that affect them, which is enshrined in Article 12 of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Thinking about youth justice, that right to participate that children have as a right, that's just so important in youth justice for many reasons. One is that in youth justice, that's a domain where children's rights in general are especially likely to be infringed. And so upholding that right to be heard, that right to participate, is really important in contributing to children being able to access all of their other rights, such as the right to safety, family, culture, and so on. The other thing that's really kind of uncomfortable to say, but in youth justice, children and young people are especially prone to being disregarded and disrespected, and even spoken about in a really dehumanising way. And we all see the consequences of that in the awful public discourse that plays out in parts of the media, social media segments of our community. So in that context, actually hearing children's views and taking them seriously, that's a really important antidote to some of these harmful dynamics. And again, there are many reasons for that. The one that I always just come to is that when we actually listen to young people, it really sheds light on what's actually driving them into contact with justice. what's going on in their lives, and what actually works to prevent and reduce that contact. And these are critical insights for policymaking and for services. Another really important benefit of listening to young people in justice is something that we see through our work in 54 Reasons all the time, which is that at the individual level, when young people are heard who are in the justice system, it's a really powerful way for them to actually buy into the changes that might be needed in their lives to start on different trajectories. So when young people's views and priorities are taken seriously as part of decision making, be it in programs or goal setting or even in a court process, that makes it more likely their outcomes will end up being better and better informed. So what it all boils down to is that listening to young people, we get better policy, we get better services and better individual outcomes. And as Vicky said up front, the report that we're releasing and sharing today is intended to do just that, of course, to ensure that children are heard. Now, a rights respecting approach also has a lot to say about government's accountability. And I am really talking here about the role of both the state and the federal governments. And we'll just flip to the next slide in a second and focus really on the role of the federal government. I think it's important for us to speak specifically about the role of the federal or the national government. Youth justice is an issue that's national in nature. It certainly is now, if it wasn't always, and so it needs national levers and national leadership. I think that's become really clear, not to mention that it's the federal government that actually has the legal obligations to uphold children's rights as enshrined in the Convention on the Rights of the Child and all the other relevant human rights standards. I would say there's been an absolute drumbeat of recent evidence about the need for national leadership around a rights respecting approach. And you can see on screen there's 4 of the key interventions of the last just 2 years. And in a second, I'll stop talking and I'll share in the chat just a bit more information about each of those and links through so you can have a look at them for those who might not already know all of them. I'll also just say if there's anyone in this call who is with the federal government who's working in a policy role in justice and you're wondering, what's a concrete thing that the federal government could do right now? What I would say is that developing national youth justice standards that are enforceable and that reflect the requirements and standards in the Convention on the Rights of the Child, that is a natural first step. Enforceable national youth justice standards, I would say it's a no-brainer. It's also a natural role for the Commonwealth government to play in the standard setting domain. Now, here at Save the Children in 54 Reasons, we're certainly going to continue focusing on advocating for the need for national leadership, along with many others, many of whom I can see on this call who are doing exactly the same right now. Very much welcome involvement from anyone else who wants to be part of that collective advocacy to really lift this need for national leadership on youth justice, and do please reach out if that sounds like you. Now I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Kylie Williams, who's also going to pick up this question of why a rights respecting approach to youth justice is so important, and will take us in a bit more detail to the consultation report that we're launching today. Kylie, over to you.
Okay, there you go. Now you can hear me. Thank you, Howard. I was wondering who it was going to be. It was my turn. It's really great to be here today with all of you sharing these incredible words of wisdom from young people. And I wanted to start by sharing a story with you all. So imagine a few months ago, as part of this consultation, a 54 Reasons practitioner sitting down with a young person who's had direct experience with the justice system. Let's call this young person Harry. So as Harry and his practitioner are talking, Harry turns to the practitioner and looks them in the eye and says, "They didn't understand. All I wanted was to be seen and heard. I was just heard and seen in the wrong way." And that's really resonated and stuck with me, because at the heart of a rights respecting youth justice system is exactly what Harry is saying: understanding dignity and the right to be heard. And too often in youth justice, it's forgotten that young people's behaviour is actually always telling us something. And it's our job as adults to lean in and listen to what that might mean that they need from us, even if that communication, as this young person puts it, is happening in the wrong way. And young people's voices, they're not just important, we see them as essential at 54 Reasons, and that's why we've run this consultation, not just to tick a box, but we did it to really learn from young people. And what we heard from them, and you'll hear today, is super powerful. They spoke to us about trust, about consistency from adults, about connection. And the stories that they shared about the systems that failed them and the few that helped them heal is really great learning for us. And these young people, they also reminded us that hope isn't abstract. It's built through relationships, it's built through opportunities, and it's built through young people being taken seriously. Their stories also really exposed gaps across the sector and the service system, and then they showed us what real support looks like from their perspective as experts in lived experience. So before we get into the meat of things, I wanted to acknowledge that we've deliberately not involved any young people here in a live way today. We respect their privacy. We don't want to be unintentionally opening wounds publicly through storytelling. And we acknowledge that even with consent, young people might not fully grasp the long-term implications of sharing their stories publicly. Circumstances change, and what they feel okay to share today at one point might later feel unsafe or exposing. However, I do want to publicly thank every young person for their courage, for their openness, for their vulnerability in this process. They all wanted to make a difference for others by doing this. So if we go back to Harry, he reminds us that justice isn't just about rules. It's really about being seen, being heard, and being valued. And I hope today you really listen, really hear, and lean into the wisdom of these young people's stories. So we know from research, and we know from my everyday practice in the field, that children and young people's experience of connection and belonging, these critically influence their identities, their development, and their life choices. And for those of you working in youth justice, this will be no surprise. So for that reason, we chose the topic to explore with young people around connection and belonging. And we really wanted to learn what it meant to them as individuals and how we might apply what we learn to increase the impact of our practice and our advocacy work. So to get to the heart of the issue, our national practice team and our youth justice teams worked together, crafted these questions with a selection of prompts underneath each one, and designed a practical approach so that these questions could be incorporated into the everyday practice with young people and not feel like an additional piece of work. We tested the pilot as a pilot, and then we scaled it nationally so that we could encourage every young person to have their say and reach as many as possible. The approach that we took was really grounded in young people's relationship and sense of safety with their practitioner and honouring practitioners' skills in creating and maintaining those safe spaces so that young people can really feel safe to be seen and heard. And of course, in line with children's right to participate, participation was voluntary. And for those young people who opted in, we recognise their time with a contribution with a voucher. Another important aspect of the process was we made sure that the young people had genuine agency in the process. They got to choose the time, the setting, the format of their sessions with their practitioners. And we invited them to express themselves in their own terms. Facilitators were really intentional in making sure that they were supporting the psychosocial safety, and we had informed consent. And most importantly, we kept checking in to make sure that we were clarifying their views and that we were being really accurate with how we were representing what they were saying. If you want to find out a little bit more, this consultation is actually part of 54 Reasons' broader commitment to child rights and participation. It reflects our child rights practice framework, our child participation framework, making sure that children's voices are not just heard, but respected and actioned. And if you want to find out more, you can go to our website and have a look. So we consulted with 31 young people who were engaged in our youth justice services, and they were across Queensland, Northern Territory, Tasmania, and Victoria. And these young people, they were aged between 10 and 19 years, and they had a range of experience with the youth justice system. So ranging from early contact to first-time detention right through to high levels of reoffending. At this point, I actually just want to recognise the hard work of one of our practice development managers who can't be here today, Oliver Hill. He's really unwell, unfortunately, and wishes he could be here, but acknowledging that his work has been an integral part in taking these insights that you're about to hear into our practice at 54 Reasons. So that's enough from me. I'm going to hand over to Erin, one of our practice managers, and Tamika, our senior practitioner, who are going to dive into the insights in a deeper way with you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Kylie. Hi, everyone. I'm Erin. I'm the Practice Development Manager for Child Rights and Participation here at 54 Reasons, and I'm calling in from Dharawal country. So with me is Tamika Bell, Senior Practitioner for Tassie's Reboot program that's all about helping young people to divert from youth justice. So Tamika and I are going to walk you through 4 key insights that emerge from the consultation, and these are young people's deep desire for connection, including mentoring, family ties, and cultural engagement. The importance of being seen, heard, and valued through reliable, caring adults and services. The question of belonging, including tensions between law, L-O-R-E, and law, L-A-W, and the paradox of family and peer influence. And finally, the missing pieces, the disconnect between young people and their support systems. So as we share these insights with you, Tamika will weigh in with reflections from her own practice to help you consider how these insights apply or could apply in your context. So to kick it off, Tamika, as someone who's worked in the YJ space for several years, what was your biggest takeaway from this consultation?
Hi, Erin. Yeah, probably that young people need opportunities like this to talk deeply about what matters to them, which was great to hear because it reaffirmed we're on the right track. Reboot is a youth justice program delivered by 54 Reasons here in Tas. It's a bail support and transition from detention program that contributes to the diversion of young people away from further involvement with the youth justice system. And I guess Reboot's approach involves quality time with every client. So it was great to hear from young people's insights that this actually matters to them. Engaging with young people requires meeting them at their level, moving forward at a speed of trust and progressing at a pace that works for them. Trust can't be fabricated, it can't be forced, or it can't be rushed. Trust must be genuine, and this can sometimes make our work time-consuming. But we need to remember that this is the work, and if we want real-world sustainable outcomes for young people, this is a reasonable cost. If we want real outcomes for young people that stick, we have to commit to giving them the time and space to develop trust with us, at the same time giving us the opportunity to get to the root of what's actually going on for them.
Thanks, Tamika. I'm sure that resonates with many people on the call today, and we're going to explore that connection with the insights as we go. So we're going to dive into those insights now, and as we speak to them, we'll share direct quotes from participants on the screen. So young people have given their permission given permission to us to share these with you. So make sure you read them through. And just a reminder to raise anything you're curious about by using the Q&A function, and we'll do our best to respond in the chat. Okay. So the first insight is all about young people having a deep desire for connection. When young people started explaining to us that what they wanted was guidance from people who had walked in their shoes, they were describing what we know from a sector perspective as mentoring. But they were very clear in what this mentorship should look like, and this is a source of sector learning for us. So participants wanted mentoring from older young people who understood their generational context as well as their community and cultural context. Mentors who've been where young people are at, share common lived experiences, and can help them navigate their way forward because of this. Mentors who can honestly say, I've been where you've been and I made it out. Let me show you how I did it. Some young people spoke about wanting mentoring and active parenting in a similar vein. There was a real desire for adults in their lives to provide moral guidance and keep them accountable to doing the sorts of things that young people perceived would help them stay on track and out of justice. Like real practical things like getting up and going to school even when they didn't feel like it. Young people spoke about the consequences of their connection with family, community, and place being effectively severed when entering justice residential services. And this is a really important one for us to consider. For the young people consulted, this severing deeply affected their identity, their sense of worth, and their well-being. It involved the practical aspect of interrupted relationship with family and community, and the challenges of staying in communication, especially where young people come from remote communities. It also importantly included the intrinsic aspects of being separated from places where young people experience belonging in unique and non-transferable ways. So thinking about this, Tamika, in your experience, what shifts when young people hear, I've been where you've been, from someone who genuinely understands their generational and cultural context?
I think the big one for me is a sense of relief. A feeling of felt trust and safety. We talk a lot about safety in this work. So, the physical, emotional safety. So those words can bring about a really deeper level. It helps them feel understood and assists with building a bond. I guess you could think of it like a connection piece on a hose. It helps to assist because it's that common thread, and that common thread then assists with building that really trustful relationship.
Thanks, Tamika. Okay, so the second insight is all about the importance of being seen, heard, and valued, which is something I'm sure we can all relate to. What came through really clearly across young people's input was just how much they want to matter and have meaningful relationships in their lives. They want to be connected and they want to belong. For some, meaningful relationships meant having responsibility and an active role, like fishing to feed their family and helping out friends. It made them feel connected and good about themselves. The flip side of this is when helping out family or peers puts young people in situations where they're breaking the law or conditions of their justice orders. And young people recognised this was an issue, but they were realistic about prioritising the acceptance and expectations of their family and friends. Like everyone, young people really want relationships in which they feel seen and heard and are treated with dignity and respect. Through the lens of child participation and child rights, this is all about being taken seriously. Young people don't feel like being taken seriously was typical of this experience with adults in general. They really felt this in systems like youth justice, out-of-home care, and education. Feeling disrespected, unwanted, and unwelcome significantly undermined young people's relationship with adults. From a sector perspective, this is a critical takeaway because it can make or break our professional relationships and limit or enable the positive outcomes with at-risk young people. In terms of what works in systems and services, participants wanted support they could count on. Regular, consistent, meaningful connection with their support workers. Workers who demonstrate that they're genuinely interested and that they care. They want us to really invest in understanding and getting to know what's important to them and to advocate for the things that matter to them. Following through with commitments to young people is make or break, and trust needs to be earned and maintained. A significant sector consideration here is how we effectively manage and mitigate staff turnover. The stop and start of professional relationships has a real bearing on young people's ability to trust and actively participate in their support services. Ensuring young people access to consistent professional relationships and quality time with their support workers so that we can listen, learn from, and better understand them is key to achieving successful outcomes alongside them. A common theme across the data was also just how conscious young people were of how they're perceived by people in positions of authority, by their family and by their community, and how this framed their view of the world. Participants spoke about feeling authority speak down to them in community and that they're quick to assume their guilt. They worry about false accusations and they don't trust justice to prevail. There was a real feeling that they might as well commit a crime as they anticipate being held responsible for it either way. Young people were also really aware of being judged because of their family connections, both in community and in the system. They felt strongly about assumptions made about them because of who they were connected to. Young people want to be properly heard. When they don't feel like they're being listened to or being taken seriously, they disconnect. This is especially acute when young people feel they aren't being believed, are being wrongly accused, or are being prejudged. So Tamika, what does it take to build the kind of consistent, caring relationships that young people say they can count on?
The words that would jump to my mind are things like persistence, dedication, tenacity. Yeah, all those types of words are definitely what comes to my mind. But if we peel it back, I guess, even more, we mustn't forget the power and the importance of our body language. Young people really do pick up on that stuff, especially this cohort of young people. It's a really big part of them. So presentation, how we turn up to a session, are we being predictable? Are we doing what we said we would do? And when I say that, not just once, but time and time and time again, it's so important. Some of them are kind of waiting, I guess, for us to let them down because it's what they've known or what they may have experienced in the past. So we need to really check in with ourselves before every session, like, are you prepared? Are you ready for this? And we often forget the power, I guess, behind a kind word or action. When someone notices a great effort you've put in, we know in ourselves it makes us feel good. So making a point of letting a young person know when they've done something good, no matter how big or small we think it is, it actually matters to them, and it matters that we've noticed that thing. So yeah.
Thanks, Tamika. And if this is resonating with you, what Tamika's sharing, please share that in the chat too, what's standing out to you. So the third insight is all about the question of belonging. So as young people shared with us about the challenges and experiences that led them into the justice system, the tension between law, L-O-R-E, and law, L-A-W, became really apparent. They spoke about ways of being and doing that they are expected to comply with as members of their family or the community, and this isn't exclusive to cultural communities either. For some of the young people who shared about this, example was fighting was part of earning and maintaining respect, a protective factor for themselves and their families. Young people found themselves caught between the ways of being that their family connection or identity are wrapped up in, and the laws and expectations of the justice system that punish them for this. For young people, it's a catch-22. Views on corporal punishment were also tied up in identity and a worldview that this is how you prepare to survive. It wasn't talked about in terms of keeping young people down, but as a necessary way of preparing them for the hard life ahead. So whether positive or negative, and this won't be a surprise to you, I'm sure, young people were clear on the significance of family connection and how it impacts all areas of their life, particularly their sense of belonging. The same paradox was spoken about in their friendships. It raises practice considerations for young people feeling torn down by their families, including how to facilitate repair within their own family and how we explore young people's ecology to help them find real and positive connections that can be sustained. Young people also highlighted how not feeling connected to their parents or caregivers, or not being able to trust them to come through with living essentials and guidance in their best interest, contributed to life choices that put them on their trajectory to justice. Most often this included young people stepping up to provide for themselves or their family, like their siblings, in ways that put them at odds with the law. Young people's examples of when they felt connected and a sense of belonging largely involved simple, fun, engaging experiences where they could laugh and be themselves. Having experiences with family and friends without tension or yelling weren't just moments of respite for them, they were opportunities for real growth and bonding, and they're the memories that really stood out to them in the consultation. Some young people expressed a desire for more accessible opportunities for sport or recreation, seeking that same kind of and sense of connection through play. So thinking about children's right to play and how important this is in their everyday lives, Tamika, can you speak to how play and also diversionary activities have positively impacted young people that you've worked alongside?
So diversionary activities actively contribute to keeping young people out of the youth justice system. So connecting them in with other positive role models in the community and opening up their network of supports gives them a purpose. It reduces time they're spending, I guess, with negative peer groups. They can then, I guess, start observing the differences in their own behaviour when participating in these types of activities. We know risk-taking is a big part of their development at this time. So it's during these years that it is so important to be providing space for these types of activities, and providing space for play doesn't have to be a big, I guess, grandeur event. As a practitioner, we can assist with providing space for these activities with play. This is a child's right. It's the right to play. It's letting them enjoy that. Some examples of where I have personally done that is taking a group of young people on a ferry trip down to a little island off Tassie called Bruny Island, where we spent the day at the beach. We had a picnic lunch, we swam in the water, had a laugh, and then went and visited some of the tiny little businesses on the island. And they just absolutely loved it, totally exhausted, and fell asleep on the way home in the car because they felt safe and they just had such an enjoyable day. So these are the types of activities that are meaningful to young people, and certainly not fruitless or a waste of time, for sure.
Thanks, Tamika. Appreciate it. Okay, so our final insight is getting to the heart of what Missing Pieces is all about. We're going to explore the disconnect between young people and their experience of their support systems. So many young people described feeling like they don't fit in, not in their schools, not in the support services, not in the systems that are actually designed to help them. There was a strong sense of exclusion, resignation, and disconnection from services, from opportunities, and sometimes from a hope that things could change. When it comes to feeling disconnected and engaged, when it comes to feeling connected and engaged in service support, young people want to grow through initiatives that are specifically relevant to them. And that makes sense if we reflect on participants' experiences struggling to fit in or belong with mainstream services. Many responses highlighted how important cultural participation was to young people's engagement and how they wanted initiatives that embraced this. In a broader sense, accessible opportunities for timely and relevant support services to young people were raised as something they really did want to access. They really valued it, but there were really practical challenges in connecting with them. They expressed a real desire to participate in initiatives to help them grow, both in justice settings and in community, but were candid about the limited opportunities for youth-centric support, activities or initiatives, especially in regional and remote community. Participants spoke to the importance of help before they embark on a justice trajectory or in early stages of engagement. Implicit in this, though, is the right kind of help, and it reiterates having workers who genuinely care about them and who don't give up on them. Many of the young people who participated seemed resigned to recidivism, not because they wanted to remain in the justice system, because they couldn't see a realistic way out of it. One of the reasons given for this was that young people will be going home to all the things that contributed to their trajectory into justice in the first place, In most cases, simply staying away from those contributing factors is not feasible for young people. It would require a clear break with their family or their community that young people don't want and they're not equipped for. Some participants found the concept of hope for the future and speaking about their future aspirations too hard to engage in. This was about being real, about the cycles of justice they'd watched family and peers get caught up in before them. The idea of hoping for something different just didn't make sense to them. For participants in the consultation, there was a concurrent theme of a missing piece in the puzzle, holding them back from the life they wanted outside of the justice system. There was a common thread of awareness of what they should be doing and what would be good to help them have the full life they want or keep out of trouble, but a stuck feeling of being unable to achieve those things. There was a real feeling of young people wanting adults to invest in them and provide accountability and guidance for them, but it was countered by expressing they don't trust the support system set up for them or feel valued through the approaches adults use to connect with them. When participants did have a service or worker in their lives who they felt valued by, they often attributed this relationship to any positive change they had experienced. Feeling unwelcome and like they don't belong in the places, systems and services that are there to protect and support them was a common theme expressed by the majority of participants and a key clue to this missing piece. So Tamika, give us some light here. Have you seen moments where a young person began to imagine something different for themselves and what made that shift possible?
Oh, firstly, I'd have to say absolutely I have, and I've seen it time and time again. But what really makes it possible is belief. Belief of us, like belief in us, us believing in them and then believing in themselves. So the ability, to believe in themselves. And that can take a lot of time. Setting up small goals that are attainable with a bit of a stretch in there builds that belief in themselves, and then that compounds over time. That's why we engage young people in setting their own goals. And I'd just like to say, don't disregard the small things or the things that we may, in our own bias, believe is small, because it is really those small things that can lead to big things. And, really celebrating the small milestones and achievements and linking it back to a plan that we've assisted them to create. This helps us and practitioners keep a purposeful, and meaningful case plan, which makes all this possible time and time again.
Thanks so much for sharing that and for your practice considerations through today, Tamika. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
So everyone, wrapping up, so in being accountable to young people, we created some youth-friendly resources of key learnings from the report and made sure this got back to them. So one resource you'll see on the screen here, this was especially for the young people who participated to feedback and reinforce, their words back to them and what was important back to them. But the second resource, it's a public youth-friendly version that we're making available to you so you can share with the young people you work alongside. Check it out and consider whether it would be a helpful tool to kickstart your own conversations about connection and belonging with young people. Accountability doesn't stop there with that step though. Now that we've heard from young people, we need to seriously consider what they've told us, as is their right, and act to improve the way we deliver our services, our practice and our advocacy, and really push for systems change. So one of the actions as 54 Reasons has been to establish an internal community of practice led by Ollie for our teams working alongside children and young people in justice. The community practice provides opportunities to have crunchy practice discussions around these insights from young people, space to properly consider and strengthen our practice, and opportunities to collaborate on the ways forward. A critical takeaway from children and young people's responses was just how important coming through for them was in their professional relationships. It's such a human thing for us, a human thing for trust to underpin the depth of our relationships. And as I'm sure all of us experience in our own practice, This is especially true in relationships with children and young people who've been systemically let down. Young people in justice want to matter. They want to be connected and they want to belong. Please consider their insights and, importantly, what they mean for you. Over to you, Vicky.
Amazing. Thank you, especially to Erin and Tamika for talking us through. How lucky am I? I've only been in this role for about 4.5 months or so, but how much I get to learn every day, listening and learning from our practitioners, but also from our people that we work with as well. So just thank you, because I learned so much in that presentation and it was really quite moving. And I think some parts of it is that it resonates so strongly with all of us, right? In terms of the importance of connection and belonging, reliability, and being heard, but also some really powerful observations that I know I've already seen carry through into some of our work across the country around that importance of mentoring and the importance of supported parenting, for example, and links to culture and family. I was also really taken by I always love the phrase, the speed of trust. Tamika, and I heard you use that as well. It's really important that that's the speed at which we move at when we're working with community. But I also was really taken by what you said, that some young people are just waiting for us to let them down. And I think that's something we all need to take away with us, right? Is there's actually a whole lot of this within our control as practitioners, as advocates, as organisations, that there is the intentionality of what we do every single day and how we show up for the people around us that is really critical, especially when we're working in these communities and with people who have been so impacted by the external world. So I really took that away as well. And the other thing I took away is seeing how many people on the call are actually from lots of different organisations and different roles in different organisations. And it just shows how much we all have to learn together, but also how much interest there is in this subject, in listening and learning together and making sure we're doing the very best, not only to advocate for change, but also to make sure that everything we're doing every day really centres a lot of what we've heard today. So thank you so much. I have really enjoyed listening. I invite everyone in the chat. It's been very quiet in the chat and the Q&A. Everyone was listening very intently, and I certainly didn't want to type while I was hearing some of those quotes. So if you've got questions, pop them in the Q&A, but also if you've got some thoughts about what you've heard today that you might take forward, please share it in the chat. It always encourages others to really think about not only how great it is to sit here and listen and learn today, but also the one thing that we might take forward after today as well. And hopefully one thing that we'll all do is really listen and act on what children and young people are telling us, whatever our roles, and continually hold each other accountable to that, which is really critical as well. Erin talked a lot about what we're doing ourselves and how we hold ourselves accountable. I know every day I bothered the team with asking what young people have told us about different areas of our work. So please do reach out to us if you want to know more about what we've learned. We do a lot of this kind of work in all the areas in which we focus on, but particularly in youth justice, I think this is important. So I wanted to encourage any of you, if you've got any questions, to reach out and chat with us and ask any questions either today in the chat or later on. I also just really wanted to reiterate what Howard said earlier today about advocacy. So we'll be taking these insights that young people have shared into our ongoing policy and advocacy work, but our advocacy is stronger when we do it together. So hopefully we can use this as one of the steps forward in working together to advocate for governments to lead on youth justice and a rights respecting approach. And that there's actually already a whole lot of documents, as Howard was talking about, that give us a bit of guidance about how that can actually be done. We're calling for the federal government to act and develop national youth justice standards that reflect human rights obligations. This would be a really powerful next step. So if you want more information, do go to the link that Howard has posted in the chat there today and reach out if you want to be part of the advocacy. You can access the report, which I think has gone up on the website today, and I did check this morning. It's up there and it's working. So please feel free to download the report, share it widely, and use it in your practice and with your teams and with your partners as well. I guess just some final words around, we heard especially Howard and Kylie press on earlier about saying what we want is better services, better outcomes and better systems for the kids and for the young people that we're working with. And what we heard today was one of the hows, and that is listening and learning. And the two quotes that I always take these with me wherever I go, but I'll just reiterate because they were part of the report today, is what needs to happen is for people to actually listen. And then another quote, and that we heard from Harry, I think he was called earlier today. They didn't understand that all I wanted was to be seen and heard. I just was heard and seen in the wrong way. And on that, hopefully we can all do a bit more listening and learning. Just thank you to everyone for joining today, and for the 54 team for all the work you've put together behind the scenes and all the learnings you bring us every day. So thanks so much, everyone, for coming. We'll also share the recording, I think probably through LinkedIn or in some way, certainly with attendees here today. But thank you for joining, and hopefully this is just an ongoing conversation. Take care.